Jinnah of Pakistan by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 20 London Final Farewell 1946. London in December was cold, wet, and bleak. How redolent it must have been of his first arrival there 54 years ago. So much had changed, yet so many feelings were the same. Jinnah still felt lost, alone, cut off from all those who once loved him, forced out to fight treacherous battles with hated strangers, all of whom wanted to cheat him of the starring role. How different his life would have been had he remained with the company of Shakespearean thespians, with whom he had performed years ago. The company he travelled with in 1946 was a far less congenial troupe, and how bitter the final act had become. He wore his black Jinnah cap, but the rest of his emaciated body was clothed in a double-breasted British wool suit and a heavy grey coat. Wavell had prepared a top-secret note for discussion with the cabinet, handing it to Attlee, Pethick Lawrence and Alexander at the start of their first meeting on December 3rd. Present situation is that Congress feel that HMG dare not speak with them unless they do something quite outrageous. Their aim is power and to get rid of British influence as soon as possible, after which they think they can deal with both Muslims and princes, the former by bribery, blackmail, propaganda, and if necessary force, the latter by stirring up their people against them as well. Woodrow Wyatt had arranged a luncheon for Plum that Clay with a number of other MPs. He reported that Jinnah was still harping on the mission's betrayal. He feels very bitterly that he should have been allowed to form a government when Congress turned down the short-term plan. He vehemently sticks to it the view that Congress have never accepted the long-term plan, never meant to accept it, and never will accept it. He says repeatedly that all they are after is to seize power. He will do all he can to prevent that. He now refers to the cabinet mission plan as a fraud and a humbug. He has now returned to the proposition that only the creation of Pakistan can deal with the situation. Any lingering thoughts that he had at Simla of a central government with three subjects appear to have gone forever. You don't realize, he said, how far the situation have gone in India since you were there. His theme song on this issue is what he calls the deliberate butchery of Muslims by Hindus in Bihar. When asked for a constructive proposition, he said that the only thing that could be done immediately was to restore law and order. They must all cooperate, particularly the British, in restoring law and order. Then, for Pakistan, I do not ever remember seeing him before in a worse mood. His last words to me as he got into his car were, "There is no time anymore for argument." The only hope now, I am sure, is to frighten him badly and to say that if he won't accept the Constituent Assembly, then his people must leave the government and he will get no support from the British. Pethick Lawrence tackled Jinnah and Liaquat after lunch and reported much the same about Jinnah's attitude. The cabinet mission trio met with Wavell and Attlee at 10 Downing Street the next morning. Cripps said that he felt that the position had now come to the stage where the course of events would depend on the action taken by the British government. It looked as if it had got beyond the British government. It looked as if it had got beyond the possibilities of compromise. If Jinnah was in the frame of mind indicated, there would be no chance of adjustment or of Jinnah accepting one. Jinnah was playing for full Pakistan, which he expected to get as the outcome of a breakdown. He, Cripps, thought the vital thing now was for the HMG to make the declaration of what they were going to do. He thought that the opposition would agree that our position in India was now becoming untenable. Alexander was not sure of this later point, remarking that at a dinner for Jinnah and Liaquat, Mr. Eden had expressed the view that possibly we ought to say that we had gone too fast and that, while we adhered to our pledges, it was necessary to give a breathing space for law and order to be restored and for constitution making to proceed in a calm atmosphere. Otherwise, we should be unable to fulfill our obligations to minorities. This Conservative Party line was, of course, the same argument Jinnah had used with Pethick Lawrence. Alexander suggested that this general line might be taken by the opposition and might command some support in the country. Moreover, the case might be made that we were allowing India to fall into chaos and that this would be a danger to world peace. Attlee left the cabinet meeting to see Jinnah and Liaquat, immediately after which he reported to his colleagues that the burden of Mr. Jinnah's discourse had been that it was a mistake to have tried to introduce self-government to India. Mr. Jinnah seemed convinced that the Congress did not mean business in regard to the Constituent Assembly. His own aim was simply that of Pakistan within the British Commonwealth. He held out no prospect of coming to an arrangement with the Congress. While the Prime Minister met with the Muslim League leaders at 10 Downing Street, the mission and the Viceroy went across Whitehall to reconvene inside the Secretary of State's old office for a meeting with Nehru. Pethick Lawrence opened that meeting by saying how anxious they all were to help to enable India to achieve independence smoothly. The Secretary of State confessed that the cabinet mission's three-tier solution seemed to be losing its hold on the thought of both parties. He added, dropping something of a bombshell to Nehru, that the question now was whether that broad general basis was any longer sufficiently accepted to make it worthwhile to proceed upon it. Pandit Nehru said that he thought that that was the basis on which everything was proceeding. Naturally, there was tension. Here, Wavell jumped in to say that a total of several thousand killed indicated something more than tension. But Nehru argued that the reason for so many deaths was that steps had been taken which encouraged violence. He had thought that the essence of the cabinet mission's proposal was that they were to be put through. Was it now suggested that the essence was that if one party objected, the proposals did not go forward? Pethick Lawrence tried to explain that it was not HMG's policy that one party should have a veto on progress, but clearly, if one major party declined to participate, that raised a very difficult situation. Nehru had been caught off guard, never expecting this intimation that his British hosts, his good British friends, his Labour comrades might suddenly turn their backs on him, simply cutting their losses. Cripps then asked what Nehru thought were the fundamental reasons the League would not come into the Constituent Assembly. Nehru insisted that the League had never been prepared to cooperate, being totally negative about everything, wanting only a veto. The Congress wanted cooperation because everyone knew that nothing could be done socially or politically if the cooperation among Hindus or Muslims was lacking. Nehru argued, however, that the Muslim League was not interested in either social or political advance. Cripps next asked whether Nehru thought that if the Muslims could be assured that a three-tier system could eventuate out of a constituent assembly, that might induce them to come in. Nehru said that he thought the Muslims would come in anyhow, sooner or later, provided that they felt the assembly was going to be convened. But even if the Muslim League came in, Nehru predicted, it would not be to work harmoniously with Congress, but merely as a step in a conflict the way it had done in the interim government. The longer Jawaharlal talked, the clearer it became to all of them that Nehru and Congress would not be able to work harmoniously with Jinnah and the League, not in the same cabinet and probably not in the same country. Still, they tried for another hour to convince Nehru that it might just possibly be better to reassure the League of a free hand in its sections to form the groups that would have satisfied it. 3 months ago, then to embark upon trying to draft a constitution without 1/4 of its population represented. But Nehru could not see why the Muslim League should not come in and put any questions of interpretations to the federal court. The only other test was the test of battle. That same afternoon, Pethick, Lawrence, Cripps, and Alexander met with Jinnah and Liaquat. Cripps asked Jinnah if he would join the Constituent Assembly if the federal court handed down an interpretation favorable to the Muslim League about procedure in the sections. Jinnah replied that his league could not be a party to any such judicial appeal, concluding that it would be unwise to plunge India into constitution making in the present atmosphere. Cripps and Alexander argued that the British would stand firm behind their mission plan, but they did not set Jinnah's mind at ease or budge him from his intransigent position. At this time, Cripps favoured a public declaration that the British would leave India in a year or, at the most, 18 months, insisting it would be necessary to hand things over to any government set up by the Constituent Assembly. Pethick Lawrence believed that Nehru was anxious to reach a settlement fair to the Muslims, but suspected many more communal elements within Congress would not let him do so. Wavell agreed, insisting there was no chance at all of Congress showing generosity towards Muslims. They discussed the possibility and wisdom of referring the Indian problem to the United Nations, with Attlee suggesting that it might be brought up as a matter of endangering world peace. Wavell reminded them that Jinnah had always emphasized that Pakistan would remain within the Commonwealth and presumably hoped to get British assistance to deal with the frontier problem. Friday, December 6, 1946, was the last day of London's India Conference, since Nehru had insisted on returning to New Delhi for the opening session of the Constituent Assembly on December 9th. Jinnah and Liaquat, however, were in no rush to get home and opted to remain in London for a few more weeks. The cabinet met by themselves and approved a statement which began, "The conversations held by His Majesty's government with Pandit Nehru, Mr. Jinnah, Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan and Sardar Baladev Singh came to an end this evening, concluding that should a constitution come to be framed by a constituent assembly in which a large section of the Indian population had not been represented, His Majesty's government could not of course contemplate, as the Congress have stated they would not contemplate, forcing such a constitution upon any unwilling parts of the country." That evening, Prime Minister Attlee informed his Indian guests. The British government had done their part. They had secured acceptance in this country for a line of policy urged for many years by leading Indians. They were entitled now to ask for Indian cooperation. In the present series of meetings, they had been unable to get acceptance by either side of the view held by the other. They proposed, therefore, to issue tonight a statement. Nehru flew home the next morning. Kanji Dwarkadas, who had just arrived in London from New York after 6 months in the United States studying labor problems, called on Jinnah at Claridge's. I found him sick and depressed. I told him that I was away from India for about 7 months, and I was, therefore, not able to understand what was happening to the country. Country? What country? Jinnah asked. There is no country. There are only Hindus and Muslims. I found that Jinnah wanted no settlement except on basis of Pakistan. He wanted to keep the fight on because he was badly handled and treated and abused by the Congress leaders. I put it to Jinnah that the Muslim League and the Congress could carry on their quarrels outside the government, but was it not essential that they should work together inside the government and do as much as they possibly could for the country? Jinnah replied, "What do you mean? How can it be possible? Do you mean to say that you and I can kiss each other in this room and go out of the room and stab each other?" I felt that if the Congress leaders had not broken away from him in personal relationship, he would not have been so embittered. His self-esteem, his pride, and his feeling of being personally hurt had embittered him, and he had created ghosts of suspicion and distrust all around him. At the same time, he had kept his shrewdness, and he knew the art of not speaking too much, as also of upsetting his opponents. He had found it in the impetuous and conceited Nehru, an easy victim. Pethick Lawrence's Parliament Under Secretary Arthur Henderson, who met with Kanji that December, also remarked about Jinnah being a sick man, which must have been common knowledge by then in the higher echelons of the British Raj as well as among the leadership of both Congress and the League. Henderson told me that he had sat next to Jinnah at the king's lunch and was surprised to see that Jinnah did not touch the food at all, noted Kanji. He conceded that Jinnah was a sick man and promptly added, "Don't think that your troubles would be over if Jinnah disappeared. Liaquat and Suharwardi are worse." I agreed, but neither Liaquat nor Suharwardi would be able to keep the Muslim League together, as Jinnah had been able to do. That 9th December day, the Constituent Assembly met for the first time in New Delhi with dignity and decorum. Acting Viceroy Sir John Colville reported to Wavell, who also had lingered in London. Dr. Satchidananda Sinha was the convening president till the assembly elected Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was to be the Indian Republic's first president, to chair its deliberations. The Hindu press generally hailed this historic occasion as the culmination of that popular awakening to a sense of national solidarity and high destiny which began nearly a century ago. The Muslim League boycott, however, proved totally effective, with 79 of the seats in that assembly hall remaining empty, and almost 300 congressmen and women took their places as representatives of their inchoate nation. Begum Shah Nawaz and Isfahani had gone to New York to present the League's case to as many delegates of the UN as they could meet, returning through London to spend mid-December with Jinnah and Liaquat. Shafi's shrewd Punjabi daughter recalled how Isfahani was talking about the Punjabi Muslims, the so-called sword arm, who had done nothing to achieve Pakistan. I listened quietly for 2 or 3 days and then I could not stand it anymore. I said that it was not the rank and file but the leaders who were responsible for it. The Qaid asked at once, "What do you mean by leaders? Today, every Muslim leaguer is a leader." I said, if that is so, then Punjab will not lag behind other provinces. While in London, Dr. Buckman, founder of the Moral Rearmament Movement, invited the Quaid-e-Azam and Nawabzada Liaquat Ali Khan to see their play and have supper with him, and wanted me to persuade the Qaid to accept the invitation. Isfahani and I had seen the play in New York and liked it immensely. Mr. Jinnah agreed, and after the play, when we went to Dr. Buckman's house, I said that I had asked the Qaid to attend the supper because I wanted Londoners to know him. On that, one of the guests said, "London knows Mr. Jinnah." How that perked him up. Mr. Jinnah was the life of the party, talked of his grandchildren and gave us a number of anecdotes. Jinnah was there with Liaquat Ali, Isfahani and the Begum on December 11th, when the Prime Minister informed the Commons that the conversations with Indian leaders which took place during the last week have unfortunately ended without agreement. I am sure I am speaking for all parties in this House in making appeal to all communities in India to cooperate in framing a constitution. Winston Churchill rose, however, to note that His Majesty's opposition have shown over all these long months great forbearance and restraint in not raising a debate about India. But I must give the Leader of the House notice that we feel a debate must now take place. Matters are assuming so grave as aspect that it is necessary that the nation at large shall have its attention concentrated upon them. The India debate ran for the next 2 days. Cripps, kicked off at 3:52 p.m., moving that this House expressed its hope that a settlement of the present difficulties between Indian parties will be forthcoming. At 4:39 p.m., Churchill rose to respond. I warned the House as long ago as 1931 that if we were to wash our hands of all responsibility, ferocious civil war would speedily break out between the Muslims and Hindus. But this, like other warnings, fell upon deaf and unregarding ears. Indeed, it is certain that more people have lost their lives or have been wounded in India by violence since the interim government under Mr. Nehru was installed in office 4 months ago by the Viceroy than in the previous 90 years. This is only a foretaste of what may come. It may be the only first few heavy drops before the thunderstorm breaks upon us. These frightful slaughters over wide regions and in obscure, uncounted villages have, in the main, fallen upon Muslim minorities. I must record my own belief that any attempt to establish the reign of a Hindu numerical majority in India will never be achieved, not perhaps at first on the fronts of without a civil war, proceedings, armies, or organized forces, but in the thousands of separate and isolated places. This war will, before it is decided, lead through unaccountable agonies to an awful abridgment of the Indian population. The Muslims, numbering 90 million, comprise the majority of fighting elements in India. The word minority has no relevance or sense when applies to masses of human beings numbered in many scores of millions. These remarks of Churchill made Jinnah take even a tougher line than he had with Attlee and Cripps as well as with Woodrow Wyatt. This final London visit helped reassure him of the strength of Conservative Party support he still enjoyed, and it confirmed his resolve to let Nehru and the Congress race round the Constituent Assembly track alone, stirring animosity among British officialdom as well as among Muslims who watched from shouldering sidelines. That same December 13th, 1946, Nehru rose in New Delhi to move that this Constituent Assembly declares its firm and solemn resolve to proclaim India as an independent sovereign republic, wherein all power and authority are derived from the people. On the evening of December 18th, Prime Minister Attlee called Lord Louis Mountbatten to 10 Downing Street and invited him to succeed Wavell. Attlee and his colleagues were most unfavorably impressed with India's political trends, and they feared that if we were not very careful, we might well find ourselves handing India over not simply to civil war but to political movements of a definitely totalitarian character. Urgent action was needed to break the deadlock, and the principal members of the cabinet had reached the conclusion that a new personal approach was perhaps the only hope. Everyone agreed that Dicky Mountbatten alone possessed the requisite charisma. Mountbatten's fatal charm was by now known the world over. His liberal ideas made him generally acceptable to Labour, and his royal blood more than acceptable to the Conservatives. As Empress Victoria's great-grandson, Mountbatten was viewed as the perfect last viceroy for India. His ambition and desire, however, was to return to active duty with the Navy, and his appointment as Rear Admiral in command of the 1st Cruiser Squadron was to have started in April. Mountbatten knew enough about India, moreover, to appreciate how impossible his new assignment was. So he put up a stiff fight against the Prime Minister's pressures and blandishments, stressing his extreme tiredness and the folly of wearing him out too young. His trusted press secretary and Boswell, Campbell Johnson, recalled, "It bought him some time, but it did not alter Attlee's decision." Jinnah and Liaquat flew into Cairo for a few days of pan-Islamic meeting en route to India. It is only when Pakistan is established that Indian and Egyptian Muslims will be really free. The Quaid-e-Azam insisted to Egypt's Prime Minister Krashi Pasha on December 17th. Otherwise, there will be the menace of a Hindu imperialist Raj spreading its tentacles right across the Middle East. Jinnah was a guest of the Arab League in Cairo and told a press conference on December 20th. If India will be ruled by Hindu imperialistic power, it will be as great a menace for the future, if not greater, as the British imperialistic power has been. The whole of the Middle East will fall from the frying pan into the fire. Asked about his talks with the Egyptian and Palestinian Arab leaders, Jinnah explained, "I told them of the danger that a Hindu empire would represent for the Middle East and assured them that Pakistan would tender cooperation to all nations struggling for freedom without the consideration of race or color. If a Hindu empire is achieved, it will mean the end of Islam in India and even in other Muslim countries. There is no doubt that spiritual and religious ties bind us inexorably with Egypt. If we were drowned, all will be drowned." On December 22, 1946, Jinnah was back on Karachi's soil. He had come full circle in the 7 decades of his life, home again from London to the city of his birth, which was soon to emerge as the capital of his nation and then to remain his final resting place. Fatima was waiting to take him home, to nurse and care for him properly, as she alone could do. But some of the longest and toughest negotiations still lurked up the steep road ahead. His heaviest battle had yet to be won.